Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wondered what really drives animal urges? Today we're diving into this really fascinating interplay between hormones, the environment, and, well, libido across the animal kingdom. We've got some studies that show some surprising connections.
That's right. We're looking at, the whole picture from the tiny chemical messengers inside an animal right up to the world around it.
And how they sort of team up.
Exactly. How they influence sexual motivation, behavior.
Yeah.
Our goal here is really to pull out the key insights, make it clear without drowning everyone in jargon.
Okay, sounds good. Let's maybe start with the big one.
Yeah.
Testosterone, often seen as the male fuel, but it's more nuanced, right?
Absolutely. Testosterone, it works early in life shaping things, the brain structure, for instance, and then later it activates behavior. But here's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
After a certain threshold, having more circulating testosterone doesn't automatically mean more intense sexual behavior. It's not quite that linear.
Huh. So it's not just more equals more.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah. And I gather the brain actually processes it, changes it for different jobs.
Precisely. The brain converts testosterone. One key conversion is into estradiol. But yes, an estrogen, which seems crucial for the actual active mating, the copulation part.
Okay.
And another conversion to DST that seems more involved in the physical reflexes, the genital responses.
And this happens where?
In specific brain regions like the MPOA, MEA areas linked to motivation. And interestingly, it uses both androgen and estrogen receptors to do this.
Fascinating. Okay, so what about the hormones we typically think of as female, estrogen and progesterone?
Yeah, they are absolutely key regulators in females. They're closely tied to the estrous cycle, making females receptive, think lordosis behavior.
Right.
A specific brain area, the VMHVL, is really central to that. But here's a twist.
Uh-oh.
Androgens, those male hormones, can also influence female perceptivity, seeking out a mate, and even preference, especially if maybe their estrogen progesterone levels aren't optimal or based on past experiences.
Wow, okay. That does flip the script a bit. Now, prolactin, I always thought that was just about milk production.
Mostly, yeah, but not entirely. It actually has this dual role in male sexual behavior, which is quite interesting. It seems dose-dependent.
Meaning?
Well, moderate levels might actually support sexual behavior, but chronic high levels, that can suppress it, possibly through its interaction with dopamine in the brain.
Dopamine, the reward chemical.
Exactly. And get this. In some primates that form strong pair bonds, like cotton-top tamarins, prolactin levels are correlated with both social affiliation and sexual behavior. So it's playing a role in bonding, too.
That's really unexpected. Okay, now stress. Stress definitely kills the mood, right? How do those hormones fit in?
Glucocorticoids, stress hormones like cortisol, they essentially act as brakes on the whole reproductive system.
Brakes, okay.
Chronic stress, elevated GCs, they can suppress the upstream signals like GnRH, the gonadotropins, and ultimately the sex steroids themselves.
So it just shuts things down.
Pretty much. Though one interesting study in ewes found cortisol inhibited their receptivity, their willingness to mate, but didn't actually make them less attractive to males or stop their perceptive behaviors.
So the desire might flicker, but the body's like, nope, not now.
Something like that, yeah.
We also have these other tiny brain messengers, neuropeptides.
Right. Just briefly, they're like the fine-tuners. You've got GnRH, which generally stimulates the
The
system.
main driver signal.
Exactly. And then GNIH, which can inhibit it, maybe even directly affecting behavior in the brain. And kisspeptin, that's emerged as a major upstream on switch for GnRH, and it seems to directly influence female mate preference, too.
And oxytocin, the love hormone.
Yeah, involved in social bonding, absolutely. But
Yeah.
studies, like one in rams, suggest it can also positively influence sexual behavior and maybe even buffer some stress effects.
Okay, so the internal chemistry is incredibly complex. But the outside world,
Yeah.
that must have a huge impact too. Social dynamics, for instance.
No, absolutely massive. Social context is a powerful modulator. Think dominance hierarchies.
Right. Alpha male gets the perks.
Often, yeah. Dominant individuals frequently have higher androgens, maybe testosterone, maybe 11-keto-testosterone in fish, and lower stress hormones. But it's bidirectional. Success can also boost those hormones. It relates to the challenge hypothesis
Ah, okay.
and just the presence or absence of mates or rivals. That's critical. There's this prison effect seen in male turtles. Pack them in with only other males, no females, and their testosterone can just tank.
Wow. Just the social setup.
Totally. And again, hormones like prolactin and oxytocin are key for that pair bonding social affiliation side of things.
So the social scene is constantly tweaking the internal dials. What about the physical environment, like daylight, temperature?
Fundamental cues. Photoperiod day length is absolutely crucial for seasonal breeders. That involves melatonin, the thyroid axis.
Right, triggers breeding season.
Exactly. Temperature is huge, especially for ectotherms, the cold-blooded animals. Affects their metabolism, development, even determines sex in some reptiles. And just the quality of the habitat, whether it's fragmented, that impacts food, resources, stress levels, the whole endocrine system.
And you obviously need fuel for all this. Nutrition must play a role.
Couldn't be more important. Energy balance is foundational. For hitting puberty, maintaining cycles, conception, negative energy balance, really detrimental.
Makes sense.
And specific things matter too. Protein, not too little, not too much. Fats are precursors for steroid hormones. Micronutrients like zinc, manganese, they're all part of the machinery.
Stress keeps popping up as this major modulator.
It really is. And it's important to distinguish acute, like short-term stress from chronic, ongoing stress.
Okay.
Stressors can be environmental, social. Even just being in captivity can be a stressor. And stress early in life, like prenatal stress, can have really long-lasting effects on sexual development and how the animal responds to stress later.
And the general effect is inhibitory.
For chronic stress, yes. It generally suppresses that whole HPG axis, the reproductive drive, the libido. Acute stress can sometimes be different, maybe adaptive in the short term, but long term, it's mostly inhibitory.
This makes me think. How we study these animals must really matter. Results from a lab versus the wild could be quite different.
That is a critical point, yes. Hormone profiles, especially stress hormones, can be very different. Often higher GCs in wild animals brought into captivity, sometimes lower in domesticated ones compared to their wild ancestors.
And behavior changes too.
Oh, definitely. You might see stereotypes, pacing, and a reduction in natural behaviors in captivity. The environment matters hugely. More naturalistic enclosures can sometimes mitigate these effects.
So context is everything.
It really is, and it highlights the challenges, but also the advances in things like non-invasive hormone monitoring, trying to get a clearer picture in more natural settings.
So looking across the animal kingdom, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, are there common threads? Or is it wildly different everywhere?
There are definite commonalities. The basic hormonal axis, the HPG, the HTA stress axis, they're conserved across vertebrates.
Okay, the basic toolkit.
Exactly. But then you see incredible divergence in the specifics. Which hormones are key, metabolic pathways, how sensitive they are to different environmental cues. It reflects all the diverse adaptations out there. Libido is clearly a very plastic, adaptable trait.
So if we were to boil this deep dive down,
Right.
what are the really big takeaways?
I'd say. 1, it's multi-hormonal control, not just one thing. 2, hormone levels don't always perfectly predict behavior intensity. 3, what happens in the brain metabolism, receptors, is crucial. 4, the environment, social and physical, profoundly modulates everything.
Right.
5, how and where we study these animals influences what we find. And finally, there's both conservation of basic systems and divergence across species. It's this intricate dance.
And what are some of the big questions researchers are still wrestling with?
Oh, plenty. Really pinning down that dual role of prolactin, understanding how multiple stressors interact, because usually it's not just one thing. The long-term, maybe even epigenetic effects of early environments, refining those field techniques further, always more to learn.
It's incredibly complex. So maybe a final thought for our listeners.
Yeah.
Consider how this intricate connection, this dance between your own internal state and the world around you, might be subtly shaping your motivations and responses day to day. What seemingly simple environmental factors could be influencing your internal landscape? Thanks for exploring the deep with us.